In this video, we are going to go over what IPAM is, how it works at a basic level, and a couple of other details about IPAM. IPAM was a new feature in Windows Server 2012, and in Windows Server 2012 R2 it got actually a lot of enhancements, some of them that in my opinion should have been there from the start. And what IPAM is actually, it is a free solution from Microsoft which lets you manage most of the IP related stuff in your environment, like IP addresses, IP address ranges, blocks, DHCP scopes, DNS entries, and so on. One of the cool things about IPAM is that it's actually very easy to set up and easy to manage, and it's directly integrated into the server manager. In Windows Server 2012 R2, it also offers really a lot of PowerShell commandlets. In 2012, PowerShell lacked most of the things that you could do from the graphical interface. And one thing to note, in 2012 R2, a lot of new enhancements came to DHCP. Now you can manage DHCP failover, you can manage DHCP reservations, filters, superscopes, and also policies. When it comes to what IPAM can do, it has a couple of functions. The first is address space management. This means that with IPAM, you can manage most of the aspects of the address space in your environment. Meaning you can manage DHCP scopes, you can manage manually assigned addresses, you can create addresses, delete addresses, create DHCP reservations, DNS entries, and so on. A new addition in R2 is also that you can now manage your virtual address space. Meaning that if you connect IPAM with System Center Virtual Machine Manager, you can also manage all the virtual IP related stuff from there. Next is multi-server discovery management and monitoring. What this means is that with IPAM you can automatically discover DNS servers, DHCP servers or domain controllers. You can add them to be managed by IPAM, and you can also monitor that, for example, the DHCP service is running, that DNS zone is healthy, and so on. The audit part is a feature of IPAM which is very helpful sometimes, because IPAM collects event logs from all the managed servers, and then you can use those event logs to search, for example, for DHCP events, for leases. You can search by IP address, by host name. You can search for user logons, and so on. And the last point, role-based access control. This, I guess, by the sound of it, you kind of know what it is. It's a new feature in 2012 R2, and it lets you give control to users in a very granular way. This means that you can give a user or a group rights to only create addresses, but only for the location New York or something similar. Let's talk about where IPAM keeps all the data that it collects. New to Windows Server 2012 R2 is that now IPAM can use either the Windows internal database, which was also possible in 2012, or Microsoft SQL Server. This is new. If you want to plan for space, how much space the database will take from your drive, then you have to follow the link that I put here and read what Microsoft suggests, because space occupied by the database depends on how many ranges you have, how many users, how many IP addresses, how busy your DHCP servers are, and so on. But talking about the space, One thing to note is that old event data can be deleted from IPAM, but it's not automated. So you have to go, click on something and then delete. When you will work with IPAM, there are two terms that I consider important to understand: address blocks and address ranges. An address block is simply a container for a big block of IP addresses. And usually an address block is mapped to a subnet, to a well-known subnet like the one that I show here. Just know that address block is something invented in IPAM. It's an IPAM term, so it's not something that it's physical or tangible. Now for the address range, this is the tangible part, because an address range is a part of an address block, and it might constitute, for example, a DHCP scope or a block of addresses that is given by you manually and managed by IPAM. Before we go on, let's have a graphical representation of how IPAM works and what an address block and address range actually mean. First, let's talk about IPAM. And you can see here I have an IPAM 01 server and a DC and a DHCP server. I don't have DNS for some reason, I forgot about it, but of course if we have a DC, we also have a DNS. Now, on the IPAM 01, I will now install the IPAM feature. IPAM is installed, and I will, let's say that I will use its internal Windows database. It's okay from my point of view. Now when we install IPAM, we select the database. We will also select the way that we want new servers to be added as managed servers. This means that we have to specify how the connection settings to the managed servers will apply, because some firewall rules have to be created before servers can be managed. Most of the times you will choose, of course, group policy because it's easier. And when you install IPAM, you will also have to create through IPAM 3 group policies in your Active Directory environment. Okay, one group policy will be for DC, one for DNS, and one for DHCP. And in this moment, IPAM will start and discover servers from your environment, and it will of course find these 2 servers here, the domain controller and the DHCP server. After they are discovered, we have to choose to manage them. And as soon as we choose that these 2 servers will be managed, what will actually happen is that the correct group policies will be applied to the servers that have the specific services on them. So these 2 will apply only to the first one, and the DHCP will apply to the second one. After we wait a while for these policies to configure the servers, or we issue a GP update force, then IPAM will be fully capable of managing them. And from now on, the database will start to be populated with IP addresses, with ranges, with events, and so on. The next topic I want to quickly cover is the difference between an IP address block and an IP address range. Let's create a block, and this block will be 192.168.1.0/24. In IPAM we have this address block, and we have in our environment a DHCP server. This means we also have an IP address range. the DHCP server gives IP addresses from 1 to 100. This means that from this address block, we will carve ourselves an address range that goes from 1.1 to 1.100. So this part of the block now is consumed by the DHCP scope. This is an IP address range. From 101 to 200, we may have IP addresses that we want to assign manually ourselves, so not with DHCP. But even though we assign them manually, it's a good idea that we know to who they are assigned and maybe other details. So we create a second address range, this one, that goes from 1.101 to 1.200. And the first one is a DHCP managed range. This one is an IPAM managed range. And we also have a couple of addresses left over that we could either add to our IPAM range, we could create another DHCP scope, or we could create a third range. It's our choice. But this is the relationship between a block and a range. Let's move on and discuss a couple of more details about IPAM. Firstly, IPAM is completely agentless, so the IPAM server will talk to the managed servers directly. There's no agent installed on the managed servers. And most of the tasks of importing data to IPAM is actually done through a task scheduler. IPAM can manage only Windows Server technologies and can go from Windows Server 2008 and up. Data in IPAM can be imported or exported using either the graphical interface or different PowerShell commandlets. It's your choice how you do it. And like I mentioned earlier, it also integrates with the System Center Virtual Machine Manager. As far as access goes, I talked about role-based access control, but IPAM also has local groups that it creates when you install it, and this was also in Windows Server 2012, and you could use those. But of course the new way of managing permissions is much more better. And talking about this, I want to also give you an idea of how this works. The role-based access control in IPAM uses roles, access scopes, and access policies to allow you to define fine-grained control for users and groups over different objects in IPAM. Roles in IPAM are operations. Windows Server 2012 R2 has 8 built-in, so 8 predefined roles, but you create as many as you want when you need them. Access scopes define the objects that users have access to. So you could say they define the administrative domain. One example that I can think of an access scope is location New York or location Los Angeles and so on. So you could say that a user can create IP addresses. This is the role. But you give it the scope only for New York. And the marriage, let's say, between roles and scopes is done through policies. When you create a policy, you specify a user or a group, and then you specify a role and a scope. And this way, you now created your RBAC solution, because you have a user that has this access only on this object. So this was a quick look on what IPAM is and how it works. In the next video we are actually going to install IPAM and configure it. So if you liked this one, please like and share, subscribe also, and thanks a lot for watching.